So today when we're looking at our Buzz page, if you go under the Q3 assignments and week of February 8th and then Monday's folder, you'll see that there's a lot of things listed there. So we're talking about the Middle Colonies. So out of the original 13 colonies, they were broken up into 3 sections. So last week we talked about the New England colonies. Today we'll talk about the Middle Colonies. And then next week we'll talk about the Southern colonies. So the Middle Colonies here, there's a lot of different information. So you have Middle Colonies individuals. Yes, you can. So you have individuals who were some famous people in the Middle Colonies. So the Read It Here covers the famous individuals that we'll take a look at today. So we have Peter Stuyvesant, James II, Lord John Berkeley, Sir George Carteret, and William Penn. So 5 people that we'll take a look at who they are and how they impacted the Middle Colonies. And there's also a watch it there that you can watch on your own time. Then there's some characteristics about the Middle Colonies. So there's a teach it and a read it and a watch it about the characteristics. So with this one, it just kind of talks about where were the Middle Colonies, what made the Middle Colonies unique and different from the other colonies, and what colonies were a part of the Middle Colonies there as well. And then we have our slideshow there, which is open there as well that you can look at. And then our last one is the show it that we'll go through together, okay? So the show it has 5 questions today, and it's worth 15 points total, all righty? So our show it, 5 questions. Now the first 2 questions are matching questions that we'll go through as we are going through the slideshow. So number 1, it says match each Middle Colony term with the correct definition. So you have 6 definitions here that goes along with 6 terms, all righty? So our terms that we're looking at are proprietary colony, cash crop, royal colony, patroon, Quakers, and pacifist. So this should say pacifist instead of pacifista. It should say an S there, but pacifist. Who are our 6 terms that we'll look at. All righty, so we'll take a look at those and we'll answer those as we're going through. We'll match them up with the correct definition. So make sure you guys are checking out your screen though first, because your screen, you'll have them in a different order than my screen. All right, so everybody has a different order, so make sure you're checking that out as well when you're picking those. So those are our 6 terms that will match up. Then number 2, it says match each Middle Colony with each Middle Colony individual with his description. So our 5 people that we'll look at: Lord John Berkeley, Sir George Carteret, William Penn, James II, and Peter Stuyvesant. We'll match them up with the correct description of who they are. So we'll match those up together as well. Then number 3, it says, what are the 4 colonies that make up the Middle Colonies? So what are the 4 colonies that make up the Middle Colonies there? We'll take our answers for that one. And then numbers 4 and 5 are multiple choice. So number 4, it says, the Middle Colonies of New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware were characterized by their diversity of all the following except what? So all 4 of the Middle Colonies were characterized by diversity in 4 of these things. So which one of these 5 answers does not belong? So which one is the oddball out is what you're choosing for number 4. And then number 5, it says the Middle Colonies were known as the breadbasket of the colonies because, so why were they known as the breadbasket of the colonies? What is their name for that one? Okay, why are they known as the breadbaskets? We'll take a look at that one as well. Okay, so you guys can have the show it open as we're going through the lesson, and then we will kind of answer the show it as we're going through. Okay, so make sure you have the show it open. And now let's get into our lesson for today. So our lesson talking about the Middle Colonies. So again, when we're looking at the Middle Colonies, if we're looking at the map here, the Middle Colonies are right in the middle, just like its name. So Middle Colonies, right in the middle of all the colonies. So we have our 3 sections of colonies of the original 13. So you have the New England colonies and the 4 New England colonies. Then you have the Middle Colonies and the 4 Middle Colonies in blue. And then you have our Southern colonies, which are going to talk about next week. There's 5 Southern colonies and they're in red there. So there's the reason why they're grouped up into 3 groups is because each of the sets of colonies share some characteristics. So we'll talk about what makes the Middle Colonies unique and different from the Southern and New England colonies, okay? So New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware make up our Middle Colonies. So what makes them so unique and different? So let's first talk about some important terms. So if you guys for number 1, we're going to go through each of those terms. So each term is going to get their own slide here, and the definition will be on the left side. So all you got to do is look for the term and match it up with the correct definition, and the definition is going to be the same wording on your show it as it is on my screen, okay? So we'll just match it up. We'll go one at a time. So our first one is a patroon. So a patroon, they are a person who held an estate with certain manorial privileges under the old Dutch government in New York and New Jersey. So look for this for number 1. You're matching it up with this correct definition. So you find patroon and match it up with the definition that says a person who held an estate with certain manorial privileges under the old Dutch government of New York and New Jersey. So a patroon is a person who held an estate with certain manorial privileges under the old Dutch government of New York and New Jersey. So match this up for number 1 on your show it. So a patroon basically is a person who owns land, a person who owned land. Now, not everybody owned land in the New World, so only the people who had enough money to buy land and who were wealthy enough to own land. So they owned their own land and were able to do whatever they wanted on that land. So they owned and controlled a large section of land. And this was under the old Dutch government. So think about the Netherlands owned a lot of the Middle Colony territory. And so when the English came over and took over the 13 colonies, they would show respect to those people that owned land and let them keep their land. And so a patroon was a person who held a state with certain manorial privileges under the old Dutch government of New York and New Jersey. So a patroon here is someone who is wealthy and who owns land. Owns land, basically. So that is a patroon. So make sure you have that matched up for number 1 on your show it, a patroon. Then we get to our second term, which is a proprietary colony. Proprietary colony. So a proprietary colony, make sure you're reading this carefully. It is a colony that is owned and ruled by a person chosen by a king or a queen. So it's a colony that is owned and ruled by a person chosen by a king or a queen. So a proprietary colony, they are ruled by a person chosen by that king or queen that owns that colony. So when you're thinking about the French, the Dutch, the English, and the Spanish, and the Portuguese, when they're owning a colony, the king or queen will choose somebody to rule over that colony. And so that becomes a proprietary colony. So a proprietary colony is a colony that's owned or ruled by a person chosen by a king or a queen. So the ruler is chosen by a king or a queen to rule over that colony. So that is a proprietary colony. A colony that is owned and ruled by a person chosen by a king or a queen. So match that up for number 1 as well. So have that matched up for number 1. So we've gone through 2 terms. So proprietary colony is a colony that is owned and ruled by a person chosen by a king or a queen. So the king or queen chooses the person to rule over this colony. Alrighty, then we get to our third term, which would be a royal colony. A royal colony is different than a proprietary colony because a royal colony is a colony that is ruled or administered by officials responsible and appointed by the monarch of Great Britain. So a royal colony is specifically owned by Great Britain. So they are ruled and administered by officials responsible and appointed by the monarch of Great Britain. So a proprietary colony could be ruled by any country in Europe. So it could be ruled by the Portuguese, by the Spanish, by the French, or by the English. But a royal colony is controlled by the English, so Great Britain. So it's controlled by the English. Then they have to follow and administer all of the same rules that they have in England in this colony. So a royal colony follows all of the rules and laws in England, and they follow that in their own colony. So it's a royal colony is a colony that is ruled or administered by officials responsible to and appointed by the monarch of Great Britain. So that is royal colonies. So far we've matched up 3 out of the 6. So for number 1, you should have 3 of them matched up so far as we're going through them. So a royal colony is a colony that is ruled or administered by officials responsible to or appointed by the monarch of Great Britain. And then our 4th term is Quakers. Quakers. So Quakers were a group of people. So Quakers, they're members of a group called the Society of Friends. So they're also known as the Society of Friends, so very friendly people. And they belong to a Christian denomination that believed in direct revelation from God. So they are a kind of a section of Christianity. So they are members of Society of Friends, and they belong to a Christian denomination that believed in direct revelation from God. So these are the Quakers. So they are a group of people that practice a certain form of Christianity. So they believe in direct communication with God, direct revelation with God. And so we'll learn about how the Quakers were basically kicked out of England because they were following and practicing a different religion that was different from Catholic. And so since they weren't practicing the Catholic religion in England, they were kicked out and they had to try to find their own land to practice their religion. It was a different form of Christianity, and it wasn't really welcomed in England or anywhere else. So they had to find their own land to be able to practice their religion. And this was kind of their outfits that they dressed in as well. So very dark colored clothing with wide hats, wide brim hats, top hats. So we'll talk about who the leader was of the Quakers a little bit in the important people. So the Quakers are members of the Society of Friends, and they belong to a Christian denomination that believed in direct revelation from God. So they're connected straight to God is how they believed it. Alrighty, so that's the Quakers. And then we got 2 more terms. Our next one is pacifist. Pacifist, and it says pacifista on your show it. It has an A instead of an S at the end. But a pacifist is a person or people who disagree with war or violence as a way to settle disputes. So pacifists basically believe in kind of peaceful agreements, peaceful arrangements. So they're people who disagree with war or violence as a way to settle disputes. So they did not want people to go to war or to resort to violence as a way to settle a dispute or an argument or a disagreement between 2 people. So pacifists were people who disagreed with war or violence as a way to settle disputes. So they did not want to have any violence or any war happening to them at all when they're having a disagreement. So the people who disagree with war or violence as a way to settle disputes. Disagree with war or violence. So very peaceful, pacifist, peaceful. Pacifist, peaceful. They wanted peace. And then lastly, our last term is cash crop. So cash crop is a crop grown for profit. A cash crop is a crop grown for profit. So unlike you grow a crop maybe to eat or to have for food, in this case, the farmers would grow these crops and sell them to earn money. So it's a crop grown for profit, grown for money. So a cash crop is when farmers would sell their crops instead of keeping it to feed themselves. And so that's how they would make money, is by selling these cash crops. So a cash crop is a crop grown for profit. It's how they make money. So in the original 13 colonies, if you were a farmer and growing all these crops, you could sell all these crops at a marketplace, and that's how you could earn different money to buy different goods and resources. All right. So those are our 6 terms. So for number 1, you should have all of them matched up by now. You should have all the terms matched up correctly. Okay. Any questions with number 1 on the show it? You feel okay? You need me to go back to anyone?
Hold on, let me make sure. Can you go back to the Quakers?
Quakers here, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Everybody else got it? So far we've answered number 1 there. So all of our important terms we've matched up correctly and got that all answered in. All righty. Then let's go take a look at our important individuals. So now let's look for number 2. We're going to match up our important individuals with the correct description of who they are. So here's our important individuals that we have. Important individuals. So when on the screen here, when I get to each individual on the slideshow, the important information that you'll need to match up will be highlighted in red for the person. So look for the red highlighting to match up with the correct statement for that person. Okay. So for our first one we have is Peter Stuyvesant. So Peter Stuyvesant, he was kind of this leader of the colony of Curacao, which is kind of an island in the Caribbean. So he was the director of the colony in Curacao, sponsored by the Dutch West India Company in 1642. And then he would eventually start to try to own some of the land in and around the Middle Colonies. So he was actually, his leg was severely injured in a raid on a nearby Portuguese island of St. Martin, and it had to be amputated. So he wore a wooden leg, and after that, he was known as Peg Leg Pete. So Peter Stuyvesant was known as Peg Leg Pete because his leg had to be cut off due to an injury in battle. So he wore a wooden leg that he walked around. So he was Peg Leg Pete. Zach, do you have a question? What was what?
Amputated means?
Amputated means cut off. So they cut off their leg. So it's like amputated, they would cut off the arm and there would be no more arm there. So he, because of his leg was so severely injured, they cut off his leg, and they basically, in place of a leg, they put a little wooden peg, a wooden leg there that allowed him to walk around. So he was known as Peg Leg Pete because you could see him coming and hear him coming with his leg rattling against the pavement.
Did they cut off his whole leg?
Yeah, most of his leg. So basically all the way up to his kind of the mid thigh is where they cut it off because he was injured right around the knee. So he got to keep some of it, but most of his leg became a peg leg. And he ruled over a lot of the islands near this area. So his rule was very unpopular because he was a stickler for the rules. He made sure everyone followed the rules to the exact T. So everyone had to follow the rules. And if you didn't follow the rules, then you were kicked out of the island. You were voted off. Basically, you were kicked out. So he was also unliked because he put the interests of the Dutch West India Company, so of he put the money and the trade above the people. So he didn't really care for the people on the island as a ruler. He cared about making money and making the island successful in trade. So that's why he became an unpopular ruler and wasn't remembered well by the many people around him. So Peg Leg Pete, Peter Stuyvesant, Peg Leg Pete, he was known as, for having his leg cut off, amputated while he was in battle, trying to take over some more islands near the Middle Colonies. Okay, so that's Peg Leg Pete, Peter Stuyvesant. Then we get to our next one, which would be James II, who was the Duke of York. So being the Duke means basically you're like the governor of a state. So like a ruler over a state. So York is kind of an area in England. And so James II became the Duke of York. So he was kind of the ruler over this small section in England. He was a ruler over this small, kind of bigger than a city, but smaller than a state. So ruler over this area in England here. So James II, he was born in 1633, and he was actually made the Duke of York in 1644. So at age 11, he was named the Duke of York. So he ruled over this area of land at the age of 11. So think about you guys becoming in charge of our state of Ohio and ruling over Ohio and controlling all the things that happened in Ohio. So that's what James II was in charge of. So he was in charge of the Duke of York. So he was in charge of York at the age of 11 and had to make all these important decisions. So in 1664, King Charles, the king of the Netherlands, he granted the Duke of York, so he granted James II, the entire territory in New Amsterdam. So James II was given all of the territory in New Amsterdam. So New Amsterdam was basically what New York is in the new colonies. So in the Middle Colonies. So the New York colony was originally named New Amsterdam. And so this New York colony was given to the Duke of York. And so James II actually never saw his land in the New World. So he never sailed across the Atlantic Ocean and set foot in the New World here. But the New Netherlands was renamed New York, and New Amsterdam was called New York City in the Duke's honor. So they renamed New Netherlands and New Amsterdam after the Duke of York. So after James II. So they renamed New Netherlands, New York, and New Amsterdam was called New York City after the Duke's honor. So this is your statement that you're matching up with James II. So he never saw his land in the New World, but New Netherlands was renamed New York, and New Amsterdam was called New York City in the Duke's honor. And eventually, James II would actually become king of the Netherlands. So when King Charles II died, James II reigned as king, but it was a short reign as it only lasted about 3 years from 1685 to 1688 before he was kicked off of the throne, and he later would die a couple years later. So James II, he lived a very powerful life, being a ruler, starting at a ruler at age 11, ruling over the York, and then eventually he would become king of the Netherlands. But he was given this land in the New World, where New York is located, and it was named after him, being the Duke of York. You can kind of see his picture here. You'll see little portraits of them as well, of these next couple of people, and you'll see how they have very long hair, curly hair to them, and that was mainly a wig, but the wigs were very popular to wear back during this time. So long curly hair is what a lot of people look like, had back at this time. All the gentlemen had long curly hair. So that's James II. Then we get to our third person, who is Lord John Berkeley. Lord John Berkeley, and you can see a little picture of him. Doesn't he look very handsome with his long curly hair, a lot of makeup on in this picture? But Lord John Berkeley, he was in the army of King Charles I when he received the honor of knighthood. That's why he's called a lord. And then in 1553, he was given control over York. So he's given the head of the Duke of York's household. In 1660, he was given the head of the Prince of Wales household. And then in 1664, he was made one of the proprietors of New Jersey. So he owned half the land in New Jersey. But then he would eventually sell his half of New Jersey to the Quakers for 1,000 pounds. So he would sell actually his half of land in New Jersey to the Quakers for 1,000 pounds. So he owned half of New Jersey to start off with. When it first became a colony, he owned half the land, but he would eventually sell that land to the Quakers to make some money. So for 1,000 pounds, and that was a lot of money back during this time. So I'll have to look up how much 1,000 pounds is in terms of dollars. Let me take a look. Let's see if I can search it up real quickly. So how much is 1,000 pounds in US dollars? It would be about $1,400 at this time. So he sold all of this land for about $1,400. So really not a lot when you think about all the land in New Jersey, but that was still a lot of money to people back then. So he only sold it for about $1,400, was half of the land in New Jersey. And Lord Berkeley, he was appointed ambassador extraordinary to the court of Versailles in 1675. So the court of Versailles was a very popular court that had a lot of power back then. And so he was appointed ambassador to this court, extraordinary to this court of Versailles in 1675. So that is his matching, that's your matching point for Lord John Berkeley. Lord John Berkeley. He was appointed ambassador extraordinary to the court of Versailles in 1675. Alrighty, and then the person that owned the other half of New Jersey would be Sir George Carteret. So Sir George Carteret, he was born in England and was an officer in the British Navy. And Carteret, he won titles of the knight and baronet with his loyalty to the crown in the English wars. So he was very loyal to the English crown, and that's how he became known as Sir and Baronet, which are famous titles in England because he was so loyal while fighting these wars. And so that is his matching point for number 2 of your show-it. And in England, he became a powerful administrator and legislator. And in 1663, King Charles II granted him and 7 others property rights to the area in Carolina in North America. So in North and South America, King Charles basically gave some of the land to George Carteret here as well. So he owned some of the land in North and South Carolina, as well as owning some land in New Jersey. So him and Lord Berkeley owned all of New Jersey. They each had a half of New Jersey. And then Sir George Carteret also owned some land in the Carolinas. So as the colonies were first being established, they were basically being sold to the highest bidder and given to some people. And once they were sold to you, or once you owned that land, then you basically had control over what happened in that area. So people were trying to bid up and try to own a lot of the land here in the New World because they could control a lot of what was happening in the New World as well. But Sir George Carteret, his statement is he won the titles of knight and a baronet with his loyalty to the crown in the English Civil Wars. All righty. And then our last person is William Penn. William Penn. So William Penn, he was born in England to a wealthy family, and he developed an interest in religion at a very early age and became devoted to the Quaker doctrines and ideals rather than conforming to the established religion, which was Catholicism in England. So he actually wanted to become a Quaker and researched a lot of these Quaker doctrines and ideals and started to practice that religion instead of practicing Catholicism, which was the main religion in England. So he was basically exiled and kicked out of England and forced to come to the New World, where he would start to settle new land for the Quakers to be able to practice their religion. So in 1670, Penn and several other Quakers bought New Jersey from Berkeley and Carteret. So William Penn was the leader of the Quakers that bought the land in New Jersey from Sir Lord Berkeley and Sir George Carteret as well. And then William Penn, the Quakers were being persecuted in every colony in America as well as in Europe. So they were being kicked out of everywhere that they were trying to settle down. So they were not welcome in any of the colonies and anywhere in Europe. So the Quakers were trying to find a place that they could practice their beliefs in peace. So all they wanted to do was practice their denomination of Christianity in peace without being forced to practice a certain way. So they wanted to practice their Quaker ideals away from everybody else. So the King of England granted them land in Pennsylvania as long as they called it Penn's Woods after his father, after the king's father. So Pennsylvania, Vania means the translation of woods in English, of the old Latin term. So Penn would build what is now the capital of Pennsylvania, which is Philadelphia, and he had a home in Philadelphia as well. So William Penn would establish the Quaker land in Pennsylvania and make the Quakers feel welcomed throughout Pennsylvania, where they would build a lot of different cities and towns that would be welcome to the Quaker ideals. So they were given this land in Pennsylvania, and William Penn basically built a lot of the area around Pennsylvania into the Quaker safe haven. So there's still a lot of Quakers that live and practice this religion in Pennsylvania today. And so Pennsylvania mainly gets its name from William Penn and his starting to find a place for the Quakers to practice their religion in peace. So that should match up all of your matching for number 2 as well. So we should have number 1 and number 2 answered on our show it right now. Number 1 and number 2 answered. Does everybody have all the people matched up good, correctly? You need me to go back, anybody? All right, so we'll keep on rolling. So next thing, last thing we'll take a look at is the characteristics of the Middle Colonies. So what made the Middle Colonies different from the other colonies? So the Middle Colonies were, here are the list of the Middle Colonies. So this will help you answer number 3. You have to type in these 4 colonies. So the 4 Middle Colonies that made up the Middle Colonies would be Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, and Delaware. So these are your 4 answers for number 3. So you have Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, and Delaware. So a lot of the names of these colonies come directly from England. So Pennsylvania, we just talked about, means Penn's Woods. So named after a little bit of William Penn, the founder of the area. New York gets its name after James II. So they named it New York after the area of York in Europe. So a lot of the news are named after areas in Europe and in England. So there's a York in England. And so the area here would be called New York because it's a new area named after York. So New York. And then you have New Jersey as well. So New Jersey, named after Jersey, which is located in England. Jersey is another province in England. And lastly, you have Delaware. Delaware. So our 4 Middle Colonies are Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, and Delaware. Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, and Delaware. Those are your 4 answers for number 3. Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, and Delaware. So all right here in the blue, if you're looking on the map, all right there in the blue, right in the middle. So New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and then a little portion of Delaware. Right below the New England colonies, and then right above the Southern colonies. So right in the middle. Right in the middle. So Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, and Delaware. Alrighty, then we get to our last little 2 slides that we're going to look at. So characterize. So the Middle Colonies were characterized by their diversity. Characterized by their diversity. Yep, I'll put the 4 things in the chat that you can see them too. So for number 3, you had New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. So there's your answers for number 3 in the chat. So the colonies were characterized by their diversity. So the Middle Colonies were very welcome to having a lot of diversity in them. And they practiced this diversity. They welcomed a lot of people into the Middle Colonies. So the Middle Colonies of New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware were characterized by the diversity of people, religion, resources, and occupations. So here's your 4 reasons of why there was diversity in the Middle Colonies. So for number 4 on your show it, you're picking which one of those is not on the list here. So which one is not on the list for number 4? Okay, so the Middle Colonies were characterized by diverse people. So they had a wide range of people living within the colonies. They had diverse religions. So they had Christianity, they had the Native American religions, they had the Quaker religion, all right? Catholic was also another religion. They had many different religions that were welcomed in the Middle Colonies. They had a lot of different resources. So different resources like wood, wheat, cows, grain, vegetables, corn, all these different resources that were located in the Middle Colonies. And then they had different occupations, so different jobs. So a lot of different jobs that people had, like carpenters, house makers, shipbuilders, all these different jobs that were a part of the Middle Colonies. So these are your 4 reasons why the Middle Colonies were diverse. So then for number 3, you're deciding which one is not on those lists. On this list is for number 4, or for number 4, yes. So people, religion, resources, and occupations were all the reasons why they were diverse. Thank you. Awesome. And so in the Middle Colonies, the colonists the reason why they were so diverse is they were German, they were Dutch, they were Scottish, they were Irish, Scandinavian, English, and Africans. They had a huge group of people, different people. And then some were even Catholic, Jewish, Presbyterian, Lutheran, and Quaker. So they had different religions as well. Okay, so for number 4, these are the 4 reasons why they're diverse. And then you're picking which one is not on the list there.
What was number 4 again?
So number 4, you see there's a list of 5 things. So there's the 4. These are the 4 reasons why they're diverse. So which one for number 4 is not on this list? That's the one you're picking. Alrighty. And then our last slide that we'll look at is why they were called the breadbasket of the colonies. So number 5 for your show, why they're called the breadbasket of the colonies. So the Middle Colonies were known as the breadbasket of the colonies because their ability to grow wheat in fertile soil and have a longer growing season. So they were known as the breadbasket of the colonies because the soil in the Middle Colonies was very fertile. That allowed them to grow wheat, which was a very popular crop throughout the colonies, so they could make bread. And then the soil also offered a longer growing season, so they could grow crops for longer periods of time compared to the other colonies. So the reason why that they were known as the breadbasket of the colony was because they were the ability to grow wheat in the fertile soil, and they could have a longer growing season. And then a lot of time, the marketplaces became the center point of the Middle Colonies. So the marketplaces were where farmers sold fruits, vegetables, meat, and grain, and merchants sold fur, lumber, and tobacco, while fishermen sold fish. Even the Native Americans would come in the markets and sell corn, beans, squash, and pumpkins. So these are all the reasons why the Middle Colonies was important and showed a lot of diversity as well. So they were known as the breadbasket of the colonies because of their ability to grow wheat in the fertile soil and have a longer growing season. All righty. So that is all kind of some basic detail, basic background about the Middle Colonies. So now you should have all the answers, all the questions answered for the show it for today's show it, Middle Colonies show it. Okay. And then the last thing we'll do before we head out is I'll show you who you're doing for your Black History Month project. Okay. So let me